Like they're absolute cancer. Like to the rest of the world, the Romans must have just looked like an absolute cancer. I mean, they did take everything over, so I'm not surprised that, but like it's belligerent. Rome is a belligerent state. Anyway, yeah. So they have, what was it, the Battle of Heraclea?
Heraclea, yeah.
First one.
Yeah, and his war elephants do really well. They're able to tread all before them.
Yes. Well, and these must have been genuinely terrifying for the Romans. Like, I mean, imagine you're some fucking Roman peasant, and they're like, right, we need an army. You've been conscripted to go fight a Greek king who's invading. But okay, that sounds like something we'd do. He's march on out. You've never really been much further than your own little town, and then suddenly this giant monster is bearing down on you. And it's like, shit, man.
Yeah. And apparently they had like these towers, they described as towers on their back. It's not an actual tower, but it's some sort of like big structure, and like professional handlers or a team of handlers. Well, it seems it was so sophisticated by this point that a war elephant would be sort of part of a team. You'd have maybe some light skirmishers that were with each elephant to sort of, it would move around as, it's a bit trite, but people have described them as sort of tanks, ancient tanks on the ancient battlefield, sort of. And sometimes they're ridiculously effective, and other times they're really shit. But as the Romans aren't used to them, they're good.
Yeah, tank is a fairly safe way of describing it, because it is designed to just plow through formations and then like make people move out of the way. We can create a path here and create panic by just sending this fucking 8-ton or 7-ton animal in. Like, what are you going to do?
Yeah, and apparently they were quite good against cavalry, because horses are less rational than men. They're more easily scared. There's certain things that horses just will almost certainly
apparently the smell
to charge.
The smell of both elephants and camels is distressing to horses, apparently.
Right.
The camel example is important because this is how, I think it was Cyrus the Great conquered Lydia. The Lydian horse reacted badly to the camels or something, and that they fled. And that's how he won, if I recall correctly. But sorry.
Yeah. So, I mean, Asculum, I myself now.
This is
immediately.
Yeah.
Heraclea.
Heraclea, yeah.
Sorry.
Right.
Yeah. So it's chalked up as a win for Pyrrhus, isn't it?
Well, it is a win. But
it's a win. Yeah.
It's not. So yeah, it is a win, but the difficulty is the Romans are a lot more stubborn than Pyrrhus is expecting, because he thinks of these as barbarians. And it was really interesting. Plutarch gives us an account of the battle when they're first lining up, and they assume, well, these are just Roman Italian barbarians. We'll conquer these. And when the Romans are taking the field, Pyrrhus is watching them suspiciously. He's watching them in order. He says, it's amazing. It's like, this order of the barbarians is not very barbarian in character. We shall see presently what they can do. Something like that. Yeah, and the Romans are just difficult for him to break. He does, and he kills more of them than they kill of him. But it's somewhere between like 4,000 and 10,000 people that Pyrrhus loses, which is a huge chunk when he would have been expecting victories in the deaths in the hundreds rather than in the thousands. They're a really difficult opponent for him to break.
Yeah, he can't really afford to lose that many guys. Certainly not veteran guys.
Yeah.
He doesn't have this incredible sort of world-beating machine for recruiting new men, and the Romans have got that. So he really can't afford to be losing thousands of guys in a day at all.
Yeah. I mean, when Pyrrhus arrives in Italy, the Romans mobilized 80,000 soldiers. They split them into two armies, so that he's facing the Roman
army groups. It's mad.
Yeah, he's facing like 45,000 Romans with about 35,000 Epirots and Greek troops. So that, I mean, the fact that he wins goes to show the obvious superiority of his army and generalship. But the fact that the Romans are so well motivated for what they do and competent in their own right, obviously, they're veteran troops. They've conquered central Italy. They've fought some really tough hill tribes. This has been, the beginning of Rome has not been difficult without its challenges. So it's interesting to see that when they first arrived, the Greeks absolutely, they beat the Romans, convincingly beat them, but it's not something that's sustainable, because they're used to the sort of like, epic wins, where when one side starts winning, the other side just routs, but that's not what the Romans are like.
Stubborn in the field, absolutely. Yeah. And I do just love that bit when you can sort of kind of imagine it, when Pyrrhus first sees the Roman camp. And the Romans are famous, aren't they, for building these really professional camps with palisades spring up in a moment, and it's all perfectly neat and squared off and everything. And he sees them, he's like, "Fuck, these aren't barbarians. Yeah, we've been calling these guys barbarians. They're not barbarians." Yeah. Shit. I can sort of imagine that moment. It's put more eloquently in Plutarch, but that is what happens. It might have had a terrible feeling in his stomach. It might have been like that, like, oh shit, like these are better than us. They're more civilized and organized and professional than us. Maybe as bad as that, but
luckily for Pyrrhus, he's they're just tremendous men of action or something. So I mean, even by being outnumbered by about a third of their own number, they still won.
Yeah. They still, So it's the phalanx, the famous, Macedonian phalanx with the Sarissa pikes, because the Epirots fight very similarly, almost identical, really, to the Macedonians. We've got the phalanx and we've got the war elephants, and it manages to do the trick just about at Heraclea against the very stubborn, really professional already Roman legionaries. And
apparently there are 7 turns of fortune, aren't there, in the battle?
It really is as many as that.
Yeah, I'm sure that Plutarch says and that's why I use that phrase. Apparently, I'm sure he says that. I should have got it up really. The notes.
Did you say 7 or several?
7, I believe it is.
7, right? I thought that's what you said. Yeah. Well, there's a river between them, and there's just a back and forth where one takes the initiative and jumps across the bank, and then jumps back, and one side outflanks for a while, and then the elephants come in and do their bit, and it's definitely a back and forth in that one for sure. Yeah. So after that one, I mean, he wins the field, he wins the day, even if he loses a lot of men. Yeah. And he marches north. He goes north, up into Italy. Yeah, so the campaign goes on, and there's sort of emissaries are sent back and forth. Cineas, his boy, is sent to Rome to, as an emissary, and they get an emissary back from Rome, Fabricius or Fabricius.
Fabricius.
Yeah. And but the Romans will have none of it, and Cineas is surprised. It's at that point that he realizes, oh shit, these guys can just get another 30,000 guys at the drop of a hat. He
like a fountain overflowing or something. He describes it, doesn't he?
Yeah, it's just astonishing. It's not really known or heard of that's a thing, that's doable, even, and it just is. And Pyrrhus isn't stupid or foolhardy or suicidal, so he sort of tries to send some presents and things, and tries to be diplomatic and puts feelers out to see if we can have any sort of arrangement. And the Romans like, no, while you're on our land, no. Like we're not bitches, not children. You're on our land. No, we won't make any sort of deal with you at all.
Yeah, they're mental. They're maniacs. They just won't treat with him on these regards. It's really quite insufferable. It's like you arrogant shits.
Yeah, and like he says, neither your elephants nor your gold have made any impression on me. Go fuck yourself.
Yeah.
It's great. Little story, actually, just to prove this Roman character. What you said, that at this period in the sort of mid-Republic sort of time, the men are supposed to be so virtuous and so strong and hard. And apparently that Roman emissary, Fabricius, hears of a plot. One of Pyrrhus's doctors is prepared to poison Pyrrhus. If you know the anecdote, go ahead.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, and Fabricius, he sends him a letter telling him which doctor it is and whatnot, and says you'll find yourself at you find yourself at war with honest men, and we'd not take by stealth what we'd take by force or something like that, and they dob in the doctor who Pyrrhus probably has put to death.
Yeah, because it's like it would be a dishonor to sort of do away with Pyrrhus in that sort of dirty, underhanded, mean, kind of sneaky way, and that doesn't befit Rome.
And they wouldn't have people saying they couldn't drive him off by force, something like that.
Yeah, it would be a dishonor to them to have sort of effectively
Yeah.
failed to meet him in the field.
Well,
In an
narcissistic
honourable way.
bastards. Like, honestly, you think, all right, calm down. You think a bit highly of yourselves. But no, it's really fascinating, and it does seem to have been like the Roman character. That's just what those bloody Romans are like.
Yeah. Yeah, and Pyrrhus and his army get really close to Rome, really close, just a few miles, but more or less to the gates of Rome. I mean,
yeah, like 20 miles away or something like that. So it's close.
Yeah, it's basically on their doorstep. But like many an army, he realizes it's not really possible, not really practicable to try and sack Rome. It's sort of too massive and populous.
And he'd just taken too many losses.
Yeah. But so anyway, they do meet again in another battle. Like the time ticks on, and the next campaigning year happens, and Pyrrhus decides he's going to sort of go down the eastern side of Italy and campaign down there, and he still gets a lot of the other Italian peoples to flock to his banner. And there's another battle, the second battle, that is Asculum, isn't it?
Asculum, yeah. And if you look on the map, like Asculum's about halfway between like Tarentum and Rome as well. The like Tarentum was for Heraclea, sorry. It's on the very southern tip of it's on the insole of Italy. It looks like he's doing all right at this point.
Yeah, he's sticking it to him. He's taking it to him. Absolutely. Yeah, he may have met his match in some ways, but equally the Romans have met their match in the sense that he's not just cowed, he's not just turned away, he's not defeated, he's still there.
Yeah, well, he's the one who's had the victory.
A lot of this plays out with Scipio. Sorry.
Yeah, he's the one who had the victory. So they're on the defensive now.
Yeah, and well, they're forced. The next campaigning season to send another army or two against him because he's still there causing trouble. So we've got the Battle of Asculum that is up next, and a similar. I don't know if you want to go into loads of detail, but a similar sort of pattern happens where the Greeks are good at what they're doing, but the Romans are stubborn as all hell. And they've got quite different. They've got quite different ways of doing battle as well. Their cavalries behave and act in very different ways, and it's interesting. I think I've heard Dan Carlin talk about and other people talk about. You wish you could have the Romans at their best versus the Greeks at their best. Well, you've almost got it here. It's almost you do get it, and it's here.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that this is a bit early in the Roman army to be able to give this at the Romans at their best.
It's not perfect. You'd want Caesar or Augustus versus Alexander. That's what you want.
Yeah, that's what you'd want. But this is
about the best you get.
Yeah, it's a fair fight. It's a genuinely fair fight because these aren't the best of the Greeks, but these are probably probably better than average. Pyrrhus's army is definitely going to be better than average, but a lot of it's Italian levies and stuff like this. So who knows how good these troops are, But I do think that a lot of it is down to the generalship as well, because I think a lot of people, when they're talking about like ancient war, they want to put it down to like the troop quality. It's like, oh, this guy has this armor and that armor. It's like, yeah, it's not really what it's about. It's really whether they run away or not, and whether they run away or not is whether they feel like they're winning, and that's basically down to the general's planning and the actions on the day. So, that armies are not consistent across civilizations. And an army is not consistent on the army's own lifespan. So like by the time Caesar defeats Pompey, he's got a tiny army, but it's made up of fucking elite veterans. These guys are so experienced, and they can rout Pompey's army that's easily twice the size of theirs because they have been in so many battles at this point, but they, on paper it's, they're both Roman armies and Pompey's got like twice as many as Caesar. It's not how it works. They're human beings, and the nature of the people themselves matters. And that nature is crafted by the environment that they're in. So this kind of like pitting like Rome against Greece, it's like, yeah, it's not the same. Well, you want Caesar against Alexander, and that's going to be a hell of a battle.
Yeah, you're quite right. And we said it before, didn't we? That a better army is better than a big army.
Oh, totally.
If you could choose one or the other, you would just choose the better army.
Yeah.
And I think in that video I put up a picture of storming Norman Schwarzkopf. with Gulf War One, you know, the actual number of men. The actual number of men in Saddam's army was loads, wasn't it? Like 1 million or something silly. And the number of US troops on the ground was, as a ratio, tiny. But of course, they whipped them easily. It was no contest because they were better. Our artillery and our tanks' range was longer than theirs by a long way. So it didn't matter how many men you've got. Yeah, it's just those examples are endless in history. Just to have the better army. That's what you want.
Yeah, and it really does. It doesn't come down so much to like killing efficiency either. It's a lot of it is just down to who's got the balls to stand and fight for the longest.
And it can come down to like the psychology of if you see one of your captains killed or fleeing, you can run away. It was actually something I wanted to mention in the Heraclea, but where they think Pyrrhus is dead because someone else is wearing his armor and he gets killed, and the Romans parade his helmet like he's been felled, and the Greeks lose heart, but then Pyrrhus rides up and down the line showing himself, screaming, "I'm still alive," and it rallies them, and it works, and things like that seem to actually are real. They play out in real time in battles, these ancient battles. It's incredible. It's great stuff. Yeah,
and the Battle of Asculum that we're coming into now, Publius Decius Mus, or however you pronounce it, Mus, he wasn't he going to devote himself, which is when he launches himself into the enemy ranks as a vow to the gods in exchange for victory when the Romans are basically doing badly. It's a way of rallying his own troops by sacrificing himself.
Human sacrifice is suicidal.
So and that's essentially what he was planning to do. And the Italian men that Pyrrhus has got believe that this is going to ruin them and stuff like this. And they Pyrrhus has to smooth this over and be like, no, fuck him, don't worry, we'll be fine.
So like the outcome was a similar thing, isn't it? If you look at the numbers, I haven't got the Wikipedia page in front of me. But, I mean, you might have, but again, Pyrrhus wins the day nominally. On paper, he wins the day. He does win the day. But
no question that he wins.
A lot of casualties in doing so. Sorry.
And the there's no question he wins. Obviously, he absolutely wins. But the battle is a hard-fought battle. Like you say, there two camps across a river, which isn't easy at the best of times. But it wasn't it they had a way of dealing with the elephants as well. They had what was it? Some sort of chariots or something they were using to deal with the elephants.
Yeah, they tried. I love that bit as well. They tried. It's like their first effort, like their first proto attempts to have like specific anti-elephant units, and they don't work very well. What is it? Some sort of weird chariot thing they build with all like tridents sticking out of it, or something. Yeah. It's a funny description of what they do, but they try and put together these like units that they think are going to be like this great riposte to a charging elephant, and it sort of is, but basically isn't, and they don't really work that well. But the Romans are clever, aren't they? They're quite wily. They try all different things, and in later they do better. But this is their first attempt at that.
And they had 300 of these wagons, but
funny wagon things.
But the Greeks win again, but again it's brutal. They lose a lot of men, and like comparatively a lot of them. When they want to lose hundreds of men, they end up losing thousands. But the problem is they're losing thousands in the Epirots, these are the veteran pikemen. The real sort of like hardcore experienced, the solid core of Pyrrhus's army. And these are the men he really doesn't want to lose because they're professionals. They're with him wherever he goes. They're not just going to go back to their homes after the Romans have been defeated in this battle. And losing them is a real problem. And he probably knows a lot of these men personally. He's probably been drinking with a lot of these men. These are probably personal bonds he has with people who are being killed, which sucks.
Yeah, and it's after this battle you get the famous line, probably the most famous line.
Yes, this is how Pyrrhus is known. It's someone comes up to him and congratulates him on another great victory, and Pyrrhus is like, Jesus, man, one more victory like this and we're undone.
Yeah, such another victory and we're undone. Yeah, it's like, I mean, well, we still have the term a Pyrrhic victory, don't we?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, but I mean, I wonder, and that's exactly where the term came from. But I do think that he's thinking of it in strategic terms rather than tactical terms. Because after this, he still had something like 35,000 men on hand. So it's not like it's gone that badly. But he can't afford very many more engagements with the Romans because he'll lose his army.
Yeah, he's definitely still got a full-blown working army. Because his adventures aren't over by a long chalk, are they, you know?
And this is why I think that the disproportionate damage done to the Epirots is the problem for him being an Epirot himself. You know, I think that there's a personal question there for him, because if you look at it on paper, it's like, well, everything. Look, so you took a few losses, but they took twice as many losses. They're demoralized from this. You've got the victory. Just keep going, keep smashing them. You know, but he's thinking, well, I can't just pull men out of the ground and whatnot. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, it goes back down to Tarentum, and it's at this point in the story, in the narrative, where it takes a bit of a funny turn, or perhaps an unexpected turn.
It's very interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, so imagine he's won sort of, these two battles, took a lot of casualties, but he's beaten the Romans twice. He's gone all the way up to almost the gates of Rome, and it's sort of in some ways really successful, in some ways not, but he's in the middle of something here.
Yeah, and he's got momentum as well. He's winning the victory. So, like, when people talk about this, Pyrrhus won a victory over the Romans. Oh, really? Did he now? He's won another victory of the Romans. Oh, great. Because like from Pyrrhus's perspective, it's like, oh God, I can't afford those losses. But from everyone else's perspective, as far as they're concerned, they're killing the Romans, aren't they? Because the Romans have been having lots of wins recently. So it's nice to see them being rolled back, I would think, for the other Italians.
Yeah, and you would think, like, well, so this is going to carry on, hopefully. Yeah. Pyrrhus is our boy, our man, our saviour. But he gets emissaries, well, it always says, doesn't it? 2 different emissaries come to him. He gets 2 different messages.
Yeah.
That one from back in Greece, from the Macedonians, saying, the situation here is perilous. You could come in and sort of take the whole thing if you came over right now, sort of offering him a command in Greece, basically. And he gets one from Sicily.
It's such a bizarre thing, isn't it? Hello, would you like to be the king of Sicily? Hello, would you like to be the king of Macedon? And he's just like, I'm already the king of Epirus, and I'm currently in the middle of a war with the Romans. Like, why does everyone want me to be their king all of a sudden? Like, what a weird thing to happen. How many times in history has a man, like in practically the same space of time, been offered 2 kingships that he has to choose between?
Yeah, well, it's crazy, isn't it? And I don't know about you, but to me, it's like it would be a no-brainer. You'd either, because what he's always wanted his whole life, he's been raised, the great goal is to be king of Macedonia. Obviously, go there. Yes, great, my chance. This is the chance of a lifetime, perhaps my only shot. Of course, I'm going to grab that with 2 hands. Or possibly an absolute push, be like, well, no, I'm sort of committed to this thing in Italy. I have sort of said I would do it. And no way am I going to go to Sicily on the crazy adventure. Of course not. That's a bit mental. No.
That does sound like a hell of an adventure, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's what he does.
Are probably a lot easier to defeat, But yeah, so this actually is one of those things that is one of those events that spawns a host of really interesting counterfactuals. So the Pyrrhus has got 3 options. He continues his war with the Romans, he goes to Sicily, or he goes to Macedon. Now, going to Macedon is probably the safest option out of the 3, I would say. He's already ingrained in the politics of the place. He's famous now from his wars and his victories, and he's had a lot of victories. And he's still quite young, so he's famous. He's young. He's successful. Everyone seems to like him, so he's got a lot riding for him. If he was to go back to Macedon, he'd probably be quite secure. Or he can carry on with the Romans. Now, he's not very happy with how it's going. He's losing men, but victories are victories, and he is probably recruiting a large number of men from Italian tribes who don't like the Romans because they've been conquered by the Romans. It looks like that he's had, a probably 1 or 2 more good victories. Because usually in the Greek world, is if you took 3 victories, then you surrendered. And the Romans have taken 2 victories, 2 defeats. So, and they don't surrender, but he could probably push himself into a position where he did have the Romans in a very disadvantageous position. Like you said, he got very close to Rome. He could probably, he's just defeated them. He can keep going, demoralize them, and probably find some sort of accord that even if it wouldn't last. Or he can go on some gallivanting mission over to Sicily because it sounds like fun. And I mean, I personally, if I were him, I think, yes, it sucks to have to conquer the Romans, but if he had committed, I think he's an amazingly talented general. So there's no reason to think that he couldn't have done it. So if he'd committed and actually stayed it out, raised the men, consolidated his position around the Romans, did what Hannibal wasn't able to do because of the position Hannibal was in and the position Rome was in come the time of the Second Punic War. Like at the moment, Rome is less entrenched everywhere. It's brimming with resentment against Rome. It's probably going to be quite easy to detach a bunch of, Roman allies from Rome and, encircle and defeat them now while they're still containable, But by the time of the Punic War, there's no way Rome's going to be contained, and you can see that, But Pyrrhus has a shot here, and he doesn't take it. He, like you said, he instead decides it'd be fun to be king of Sicily.
Yeah. It's like people wonder all through the ages, as we do right now, what was going through his mind exactly to make that choice. Because that's quite it seems maybe he had like this grand plan. He would take all of Sicily, then maybe hop over to Carthage, take all of Carthage.
Yeah.
Just this grandiose plan for being sort of an Alexander of the West, and just wherever he goes, he would win.
And he outlines that to Cineas. He's like, we'll go to Italy, then Sicily, then to North Africa, then come back around and get Macedon. And it's like, why?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's easy. It's easy for us in hindsight to say, well, the obvious thing to do was to take Macedon while you can, or at least fulfill your word in Italy, and to go to Sicily is crazy. But that was the choice he made, and maybe it's to do with he just had really high hopes. I mean, in
his defense, he's wildly successful in Sicily.
Oh yeah. Plutarch says, quote, amidst these difficulties, new hopes as vain as the former offered themselves to Pyrrhus. And in Cole Benjamin's seminal 2014 video, Benjamin characterizes Pyrrhus as a fool of hope. And I think that's quite
No,
true.
I got that from somewhere else.
Well, I was going to say, in Plutarch, he talks about Pyrrhus's hopes all the time. Like, these hopes were dashed, and now he's got new hopes. He does say that a lot, and so you just like what's going on in his mind. He must have just had all these dreams of grandeur.
Glory. Yeah. Glory. Is like Achilles style glory, for defeating all the Trojans effectively. But right. So to give him his credit, he decides to say good luck Tarentum. I'm sure he leaves a garrison in Tarentum, and then nips on over to Sicily, which is only like 2 miles straight, so it's hardly anything. And then he just cleans up. He essentially drives.
Really successful, at least at first, isn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. He proclaims himself king of Sicily, and he just starts. He knocks them back to Lilybaeum, doesn't he? He doesn't get them out of Lilybaeum, but otherwise the rest of the island he takes. And there's the fortress of Eryx, which is on a volcano slope, isn't it? But it's a Carthaginian fortress, and it's huge, profoundly well defended. But Pyrrhus captures it by storm. Do you have any of the quotes from Plutarch with that? Because that is an amazing part. I don't know
about that specific part. I'm looking at it right now.
I've got it. So basically he goes over, and I don't even know if he fights a full-on battle with the Carthaginians, but he just starts taking over the place. The Sicilian towns and cities just start giving themselves over to him. In fact, here he says, here we go. Now, on reaching Sicily, his hopes were at once realized securely. The cities readily gave themselves up to him, and wherever force and conflict were necessary, nothing held out against him at first. But advancing with 30,000 foot, 2,500 horse, 200 ships, he put the Phoenicians to rout and subdued the territory under their control. Then he was determined to storm the walls of Eryx, which was the strongest of their fortresses, and had numerous defenders. So when his army was ready, he put on his armor, went out to battle, and made a vow to Hercules that he would institute games and a sacrifice in his honor, if the god would render him, in the sight of the Sicilian Greeks, an antagonist worthy of his lineage and resources. Then he ordered the trumpets to sound, scattered the barbarians with his missiles, brought up his scaling ladders, and was the first to mount the wall. Many were the foes against whom he strove. Some of them he pushed from the wall on either side and hurled them to the ground, but most he laid dead in heaps about him with strokes of his sword. He himself suffered no harm, but was a terrible sight for his enemies to look upon, and proved that Homer was right and fully justified in saying that valor, alone of all the virtues, often displays transports due to divine possession and frenzy. After the capture of the city, he sacrificed to the god in magnificent fashion and furnished spectacles of all sorts of contests. I mean, it makes him sound like a Homeric hero.
Yeah, absolutely, like covered in gore.
Yeah, this is like Pyrrhus's high point, where he's just an unstoppable war machine, and he just sweeps through Sicily with no problems at all. The only place he doesn't manage to take is I think it's Lilybæum. But then but then he's like, right, okay, Sicily, we're gonna crack on, and we're gonna start invading North Africa, doesn't he?
Yeah, that was really good, actually, you reading that reasonably long quote, because I was looking at the same bit, and I've got a different translation, and that's always really good to like see how the same idea or concept or the same event is translated slightly differently. I always really like
how's
that.
it translated in your one?
Well, I mean, you read almost 2 paragraphs there, but just like just slightly different words for things about how he put on his armor and stuff, and the Homeric quote is more or less exactly the same, but yeah. And it seems to me, I always think of this bit with Sicily is, and it plays out again in history in all sorts of times, when a general is just massively successful, just can't stop winning, everything's going their way. And then on a dime, everything falls apart. One event, it's just like, from that point on, everything goes wrong. I suppose one thing, like Hitler, can you imagine Hitler when he invades France successfully and gets to Paris and gets to sort of walk the Champs-Elysees? It's like everything's just gone right for him for like the last few years, just everything. But that was the last of like the massive wins sort of a thing. It's very broad strokes of the brush here, but this what happens with Pyrrhus here is that everything goes right, and then almost at once, that last siege you were talking about there, Plutarch says he uses a higher hand and uses great rigor to sort of wring out money and troops from all of Sicily to sort of make this last siege happen quickly. And everyone just thinks, oh, you son of a bitch, you're just a tyrant son of a bitch. Fuck you, actually.
Yeah, he
and
wants
everything falls apart.
Yeah, he wants to raise money for ships and stuff to invade North Africa, doesn't he?
Yeah, just to push his ambitions on. He doesn't really care. It seems at this point, anyway, he doesn't really care who he pisses off to do that. And the whole island seems to turn against him, like really quickly. In a matter of days or weeks, they're just not on his side anymore. And he decides, I'm not going to sort of reconquer the whole thing. So he decides to leave.
But here's how Plutarch puts it, right? A terrible hatred arose against him in the cities, some of which joined the Carthaginians, others called in the Mamertines. As he saw everywhere secessions and revolutionary designs, a strong faction opposed him, he received letters from the Samnites and the Tarentines, who had been excluded from all their territories and could with difficulty maintain the war even in their cities, and begged for his assistance. This gave him fair pretext for sailing away, without being called a flight or despair of the cause of the island, but in truth it was because he could not master Sicily, which was like a storm-tossed ship, but desired to get out of her, and once more threw himself into Italy. And we're given the quote that is probably apocryphal, but my friends, what a resting ground for the Carthaginians and Romans we are leaving behind us. But that's undoubtedly going to be something that's added later.
Yeah. Once the Carthaginians and the Romans have generational battles there, it's just too perfect a thing to have said at that point.
It's definitely something that was made up.
Yeah, so he goes back to Italy, and there's a little story there, actually. When he first goes back into southern Italy, the toe of Italy there, he robs a temple, or a couple of temples. I think a temple's full of some treasures, and he robs it because he needs money. He's at quite a low ebb for money and things.
Right.
And he robs it, which is, a black mark, really. And then the ships he puts it all in just immediately are sunk in a storm. And he sort of thinks himself cursed because of that. And a little story, and that's a story when he cuts that guy in half from sort of the center part and all the way down his sternum and cuts him in two. That bit. But and he goes back into Italy, and the Romans, they're not just going to roll over or just stay behind their walls. He's back there, and so, they have a final third big battle.
Yeah, and this one's even closer to Rome, actually. He still pushed the Romans further back towards their own borders.
Well, this is the one. Well, so Pyrrhus has got this reputation, hasn't he, for being a great commander. Yeah. And as I said earlier, he was first introduced into my consciousness as the Western Alexander. He's that great. He's on that sort of a level. But there's a few times when he fucks up. He does something a bit shit, really. Like he makes a mistake, an error, an unforced error kind of a thing. Someone like Alexander never did. And at this battle, it's one of those. The Romans have taken a really good defensive position on top of a hill or a bit of a rise of land, and he decides that he's going to send this sort of detachment, this wing of troops and cavalry, a little bit of cavalry, I think, up through some hills on a side march through the night. That's something Alexander would have done, and hopefully they'll come round behind them or to their side in the morning, and there'll be a blast of trumpets, and they'll coordinate attack in the morning. Again, classic, something Alexander might have done. He tries to sort of recreate that, and it just doesn't work. They're just not that good. They're not professional enough to make it work, and it ends up in a bit of a shambles. They lose their way and get lost.
They march through the night along some like disused goat paths or something, don't they? And end up like essentially when dawn, like when the sun comes up, they find themselves exposed. So the Romans like, oh, we can easily come and attack you now. And it's like shit. Exactly, as you say, this didn't work. And they actually capture some of the elephants, don't they?
Yeah. So the idea would be that sort of as the sun rises, this wing of Greeks will like crash down out of the hills, hidden in the tree line, to the flank or even behind the Romans, whilst at the same time, Pyrrhus's main force sort of come up the hill and attack at the same moment, and that's the idea. And it's just a shambles. They're seen sort of in disarray as the sun rises, as the sun comes up. The Romans can just see them sort of in disarray on the high land above them. It utterly fails. But nevertheless, they've got no option now. The die is cast, so to speak. So they still attempt to carry out that plan, and the Romans just organise a defence, and they've got like Mark II, these chariots Mark II for taking on elephants, and they realise the best thing to actually do, other than just getting out of their way, is just to throw loads and loads of spears, just like a wall of spears and darts and javelins at them, and eventually even elephants will go down under that, or you take out their riders. And that's how you do it. And so that fails. That part of it fails. And so the Romans, sort of elated at that, sort of charge down the hill at the main body, Pyrrhus's main body, and they clash.
Yeah, I mean, like it's a difficult battle as well. Like they get driven back by the elephants to their camp, don't they? And then they essentially drive the elephants off with javelins from the camp. And the elephants then go crashing through Pyrrhus's own lines. And there's a story of like a wounded cub, an elephant calf that's there, and it's freaking them out. But the elephants obviously played some kind of key part in this battle, and not a good one either.
Yeah, they come running back and trample some of Pyrrhus's own men. Yeah, and it's interesting how the first battle with the Romans, they're sort of overpowered and they're great and they work really well. The second battle, they they do work quite well, but not as well. And in this one, they're shit, if not detrimental. So it's good to see the progression. The Romans learn quickly. Got to give them that. Yeah,
absolutely. And it would have been more sensible just to essentially not use the elephants. But Pyrrhus
has to make an orderly retreat, doesn't he? Really, to prevent a full massacre or a full defeat, he has to sort of retreat. It's not not great.
Like, I mean, most charitably, you could call it a stalemate, because it's not like the Romans could drive him off necessarily, I think. But he'd clearly miscarried here, and it could have gone a lot better.
Yeah, he hoped for better, hadn't he? His hopes were basically dashed here, and so in the end he leaves that theatre as well. Plutarch says, quote, "Thus Pyrrhus fell from his hopes of Italy and Sicily after he had wasted 6 years in these expeditions," end quote. And that just in a nutshell says it all, doesn't it?
And it's interesting, like he's won so many victories and he's accomplished a lot, and yet he walks away with absolutely nothing.
Yeah, other than a boosted reputation, massively boosted reputation, he walks away empty-handed. Yeah, he hasn't got a huge army and he hasn't got any money. When he goes back to Pyrrhus and the Greek world, he's penniless, more or less.
Yeah. Again, this is all. There's still loads of exciting stuff to come. Like I can't get over how exciting this man's life was, and I really love this character from history because like he did so much stuff, and he seems to have been so likable along the way, and he really seems to have like redeemed himself as a man in many, many different circumstances. Like say, like, you know, all of the heroism that's associated with him. It's like, how can you not love this guy? Like, what a fucking what an absolute guy, you know, a lad. I bet he's a laugh to go drinking with. You know what I mean? I have a proper man crush on Pyrrhus. Well, this is why I'm jumping in. When I can remember the quotes like almost exactly, I really want to go. Really, like, look, I can remember because I haven't read Plutarch's Life of Pyrrhus for years. Not like, and the thing is, I loved it. You know, I was at this was easily my favorite. Oh, I don't know, Alcibiades was amazing as well. But yeah, Pyrrhus was one of the ones I really enjoyed because it was like a boy's adventure story. You know, and it's like, and that you know, that's exactly how it sounds when you're reading through it. But yeah. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, so when he goes back to Epirus, back to sort of the Greek theatre, he goes back into the wars of the successors. I mean, the first 4 wars of the Diadochi are over, but it's just the next generation of that. It's still happening. It's still going on. It's sort of their grandchildren, you know, still all happening.
Well, yeah. So So the easiest way for people to understand what's going on here, right, is when we get back to Pyrrhus's fork in the road, where he's like, right, I can become a king of Sicily or king of Macedon. The reason that he got a call from Macedon is because there was a giant invasion of barbarians. The one we were talking about earlier, 85,000 Celts had decided we'll just sally on in and see what we can find. And so this was in 281 BC. 280. A great army had marched down. They'd defeated by the Macedonians had been defeated by the barbarians, and they were stomping around. So Pyrrhus was basically asked to come back and fight these barbarians, which probably would have been a much easier battle for him, to be honest. I think that he would have undoubtedly have won that.
Yeah, in my translation, they call them Gauls all the time.
Yeah, Celts.
Seems funny, but that's in my translation. And so like there's that guy Ptolemy the Thunderbolt.
Yes.
So one of the things, Ptolemy, the old Ptolemy, who was there under Philip II and all the way through Alexander's reign, he's still knocking around. He's really old, but he's still down there. Ptolemy Soter, the savior, and he had 2 sons, so he called them both Ptolemy, and he gave the younger one, sort of made him a crown prince, or he was going to take over, and the older one, this Ptolemy Thunderbolt, didn't like that. He seems like he's a crazy character. He seems like one of the most impetuous, most violent, insane, unpredictable ones out of all these guys, and a lot of them are that. So for him to stand out, he seems like quite a character. And anyway, at that period, he was up there, and he actually gets killed, I think, by I'm pretty sure he dies in a battle against them. And anyway, yeah, that is part of the story at this point, that there's this massive barbarian Gaul invasion from the north coming down, and Pyrrhus sort of co-opts a lot of them. But one of his main adversaries over there is Antigonus, but this is Antigonus II. It's the grandson of the old one-eyed Antigonus. It's Demetrius's son, so it's the grandson, but he's another Antigonus. So he's sort of his main enemy in the grand sense.
And so just to get the timeline exactly right, so it's 280 that Pyrrhus goes over, and then 274 I think it is that he arrives back.
Because of course we're counting down, isn't it? We're BC, so we're counting down. Got to remember that. Yeah,
and in this window, the Gauls have been defeated. The back of the Gallic army has been broken, and so there's just barbarians around. And so Pyrrhus, when he goes back, was how Plutarch says he has 8,000 foot and 500 horse. And since he had no money, he sought a war by which he could maintain his army. Some of the Gauls joined him, and thereupon he made an incursion into Macedonia, where Antigonus, the son of Demetrius, was reigning, and he began plundering the country. So you got to pay for this army somehow, right? But this, I love this next way that he says it. But after he had taken a great number of cities, 2,000 Macedonian soldiers came over to him, and he began to hope for greater things. And he set out to attack Antigonus, and he routs him hard, doesn't he?
Yeah, it's another one of those examples where it says, quote, he called to them by their names.
Yes.
You know, he's calling out to Antigonus II's captains, going, I know you, I know your dad or your son or whatever. Like, I'm married, my cousin's married to your cousin. You know, all this stuff.
Yeah.
Come over to me, and it bloody well works. Amazing.
Yeah, he in fact it says he brought over to him all the infantry of Antigonus's in a body. So Antigonus took to flight because he defeats the rear guard, and then the men just go over to him because I mean, like, Antigonus must have been a fresh-faced young man, just like
times on his side.
But Antigonus looks like a young man, and a young man doesn't look like a fucking veteran warrior with a famous name, which Pyrrhus does. He looks exactly.
He's the most famous captain in the world. He's the most famous general in the world at this point.
Yes, and he has a reputation for personal heroism, and he seems to be well liked by his men. So it's like, of all the guys that you don't want to turn up on your door as a young man who's not been in charge of Macedon for very long, it's a guy like Pyrrhus, and the army just defects.
Yeah, it'd be a nightmare from Antigonus II's point of view. A nightmare.
Yeah, like shit. Everyone loves this dude. They're all like, "Oh, God, Pyrrhus, this is gonna be great." What do you mean? He's the enemy. But Antigonus runs off, doesn't he, and goes off to some of the cities near the sea.
Yeah, so that's the thing. Pyrrhus wins. Yeah, and but it always gets mentioned that he doesn't finish him off.
Yes.
Antigonus had a really strong navy, and Pyrrhus didn't really have any navy, and so he was able to sort of literally just hold out in a few ports. Yeah. And in hindsight, all the historians say it was really dumb not to completely wipe him out.
And this is the real lesson of Pyrrhus's life, right? It's the real lesson is, if you commit to something, finish the job. Like, because he could easily have come back over when the Gauls are invading, won handily, I have no doubt, become legitimized, become the king of Macedon, really sink in roots and become secure there. Or he probably could have beaten the Romans if he'd really put his back into it. Or he probably could have beaten the Carthaginians if he didn't think that Sicily could be just used as a personal bank account, Like, if he'd actually taken the time to do the job properly and finish it properly, rather than chasing fleeting glory, he could have secured probably everything that he put his mind to. There's no one around who can beat him. He's winning all of these battles, and the only battle he loses or, has to retreat from is one where he makes a fuck up. So it's not like there's any challenger to him, and yet he still ends up with nothing at the end of it once again he allows his opponent to get away and he doesn't finish the job, but he thinks, right, okay, where am I going next now that I'm the king of Macedon?
Yeah, again, it's like the fall of hope, that his hopes seem to lead him astray all the time. He's always dreaming or hoping of the next big thing, and doesn't finish the other things off first. Just abandons the projects because he just hopes for something bigger and better all the time. I mean, Plutarch just explicitly says that multiple times. Again, just right here, I'm looking at a line, and in the Kings and Generals channel, they said something, maybe it's a line from somebody else, it's such a good line, but they said something like he was never a strategist, or no, always a
tactician, never a strategist.
That's it, perfectly. Yeah, that's the one. And that's so true. I mean, that's just so that's so laconic. It's perfect, isn't it? It's just bang on, right on the nose. And
the thing is, it encapsulates his entire character. You can tell, he's a sort of man's man. He likes war, he likes fighting, he likes glory, and the rest of it, he's not so worried about, and you can't quite think, well, where's Cineas? Come on, fucking make him do it, mate. Pyrrhus, wouldn't it be more sensible to actually get the job done? Well, maybe.
Yeah, so he makes sort of an error, well, in the end, a fatal error to not push Antigonus or the Antigonid faction completely out of Greece, northern Greece or Macedonia. And so they sort of he remains a toehold there. And Pyrrhus's eye turns, his eye of Sauron sort of looks somewhere else. And he gets an invite, again, another emissary comes to him, and a messenger saying, look, there's a thing down in Sparta. There's some shit going on down in Sparta, and maybe you could come down as the world famous Pyrrhus can just come down and conquer all of Greece and defeat the Spartans, and what a feather in your cap.
It's an exiled Spartan prince, isn't it?
Yeah, Cleonymus.
Yeah, Cleonymus.
A king Cleonymus, because the Spartans had two kings, didn't they, usually? And weirdly, and anyway, he was one of them, or a deposed one, or a claimant who didn't get it or something, and he goes up and he says, look, come and help me out, I'll be a puppet, install me as a king and I'll be your puppet, let's do that. And Pyrrhus is like, sounds good.
Sounds fun.
I want
This
me
will
a
be
piece
fun.
of
I've
that,
never attacked
actually.
Sparta before, you know.
Yeah, and Sparta was still a prize, you know,
Oh,
really.
absolutely, yeah.
That they were able to sort of, again, even if it was only on paper, were able to stay independent through a lot of these successor wars, a lot of them. And so to best them was something Pyrrhus would have wanted for sure, and he
Another
goes for it.
feather in
So
his cap, yeah.
yeah, and so there's this stage of it, and he goes down there. It's one of those things. He keeps claiming that he's not going to attack them
Yeah.
whilst he's in their territory. Go, no, I'm not attacking. No, I'm here friendly, and he's not at all. It's pure
Yeah.
lies.
He keeps advancing, and he's just like, no, it's fine. Don't worry about it.
He gets straight up to more or less the walls of Sparta. Well, they don't have walls. That sort of thing, is it? Famously, Sparta didn't need walls, but he gets right up to. He gets into the valley.
They've dug
Sparta
ditches in which they've sunk the wheels of wagons and stuff like this, isn't it? So they're fighting from behind these.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, they realise that there's this army, this really genuinely powerful army that could take Sparta, and they realise this at the last minute, literally like a day or something before they turn up, and so they're prepared to just. They have a town hall, and the men decide they're going to send the women and children away and make some sort of last ditch defence. And the women say, "Great thing, isn't it?" The Spartan women say, "Well, no, we don't want to live if Sparta's fallen, so we'll fight." If nothing else. And so the men are like, oh God, how embarrassing. All right, we're going to put up a last ditch effort. Every man jack of us, man, woman and child's going to help out. And the women and dig this trench. This trench gets dug. There's quite a lot of description about with wagons sunk into it to like break up any large cavalry or elephant charges. And it's quite a crazy, heroic thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's almost like the Spartans just realized why walls were useful. Like, oh shit! Actually.
Suddenly,
now I see why everyone else is doing it. You know, but yeah, it was Spartan pride that prevented them from building walls. It was stupid. Really is just ridiculous. But okay, but yeah, it became obvious that Pyrrhus is come to claim it all for himself, and then he attacks.
Yeah, well, Pyrrhus gets there sort of at night or at dusk, and Cleonymus, the Spartan, says, "Attack right now! Attack right now!"
Yeah.
And he's like, "No, we'll attack in the morning." And like during that night is when they get a lot of the work done. The women say to the men, "You sleep. You're going to have to fight all day tomorrow. So you go to sleep. We'll dig the ditch." It says, Plutarch says, quote, "As soon as the work was begun, both matrons and maids came and joined them, the former with their robes tucked up and the latter with their undergarments only." But yeah, so it's just a nice picture to see that the women putting their back to it in like this last ditch attempt to try and save themselves.
Yeah, I agree. We should put the women to work. But no, it's this duty out there, isn't there? In Christ, you know, that's sensible, very sensible women.
Yeah, and so the next day they have a battle, sort of more or less all day long. And
well, hang on a second. The Spartans have got an extra problem here because the Spartan army is off in Crete, isn't it?
Oh yeah, their other king and their main army is off. That was another reason why Cleonymus said, you know, right now, let's do it right now. They're at a low ebb, but a weak point. Let's. Yeah.
But anyway, so the next morning, there's the trench and the wagons in it.
Yeah, and it seems that it works quite well because Pyrrhus's attacks keep getting repulsed. Yeah. Like against the odds. It's like it is like this last. Like Rourke's Drift or something, just totally outnumbered, and you're all going to die for sure. Yeah. It's just how long can you hold out? But you end up actually winning.
Yeah.
I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of Ptolemies in this. Pyrrhus's son, he's got a few sons, but the main oldest one.
Well, before we get to that bit, I liked the bit where Pyrrhus basically gets over the trench, and like it's again important to note Pyrrhus is always in the very thickest of the action, like wherever the action is the most intense. That's where Pyrrhus goes, and he gets over across the trench and kills a bunch of Spartans and like. But there's the horse is cut out from under him or something, isn't it? So they end up retreating.
Yeah, he actually personally does get across that trench, sort of behind them, so to speak. Yeah. Like you would have thought the day might well have been won, or should have been won at that point. But it seems not. Again, he was repulsed back somehow.
Yeah, but the fight lasts the whole day, and as Pyrrhus says, night put an end to the battle. So they couldn't get in. The Spartans were really going for it.
Yeah, and it seems how many examples again are there through history when you've got your back up against the wall, so to speak? There's nowhere to run. There's no other defences. There's nowhere to retreat to. It's you have to die on the spot or win. You have to. How much that counts for so much. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, it counts for many, many, many times more men. If every single person in that line is going to die on that spot. Well, I mean, yeah, lots of examples of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I suppose, and Pyrrhus has to make a decision really whether he's going to, you know, keep attempting this, keep trying, or not. And you know, again, it's in Pyrrhus's character, isn't it?
Oh, of course it is. I mean, he has a dream that there's a thunderbolt that smites the city, and so he wakes up convinced the next day he's going to take it.
Yeah, and well, they put a lot of store in dreams, didn't they?
Oh yeah.
And if they say if your men believed your dream, if you told them you had this great dream, this great prophetic dream, and then they all believe it, it's like that's like can actually make a difference to their esprit de corps, their morale, or actually like turn the tides in battles because you had this dream. It's weird, but yeah, that comes up more than once throughout ancient history. The historians.
Oh yeah, they thought of dreams as messages from gods, prophecies. You know, they actually thought of dreams that way. So okay, well, I hope they're not, because you know I've had weird dreams and I don't want some of them going true. But yeah, so doesn't he get like another message at this point?
What, from Argos?
Yeah, like so he wakes up the next day and he's like, yeah, okay, well we're gonna do this. I'm sure that they fight a bit or something, and then he gets an invitation from Argos.
Yeah, so it just says Pyrrhus decided to put an entire stop to the action, thinking that the Spartans would sort of, if he put a stop to the action, the Spartans would give up because there's not many of them left, and that they're so obviously beaten. He'll just give them a bit of a breather, and they'll realise, they'll sort of come to their senses, and they'll give up, and they don't. Just don't. They're like, oh great, thanks, a little bit of a respite, brilliant for us, cheers. And when Pyrrhus realizes that that's their sort of mindset, he's like, oh fuck, like
again, not committing.
He just decides to break off entirely.
Yeah, because what was the like a civil war at Argos or something, wasn't that?
Yeah. So Argos, another city, you know, not too far away, still in the Peloponnese.
A famous and prestigious city as well.
Yeah, pretty big one. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and there's some sort of internal politics, or a couple of different factions, or two different leaders sort of vying for complete control there, and they sort of get sucked into this much bigger war between Antigonus and Pyrrhus. You know, between these two sort of superpowers, really. If there's a cold war going on between them that occasionally goes hot here and there, suddenly Argos has been drawn right into the centre of it. You know, I sometimes think, well, because it ends up Antigonus's army comes down and meets him, well, they clash in and around Argos. So what started off as just a tiny little local dispute, inner city dispute sort of a thing, makes you think, like, perhaps sometimes, maybe it's not a great analogy, but if you're like a North Korean in the 40s or 50s, and then suddenly you find yourself in the middle of a war between the United States and China, like, what the hell?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah. Suddenly great powers are breathing down your neck.
Like suddenly these two giant armies sort of converge on your town. So Pyrrhus, being Pyrrhus, wants to just engage straight away. And Antigonus II, the younger man, a bit more prudent, a bit more sort of sensible. One of the lines is, he says, I can't remember the exact quote, I've got it somewhere, but he says, time's on my side. Time is the weapon that I shall use as much as the sword. And if Pyrrhus is weary of his life, there are many ways to end it. So he says that. And so he decides to sort of not accept battle. You can choose to sort of refuse battle, can't you, if you want to? Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. And it's eminently sensible for him to do this, because that's Pyrrhus's one real strength. You know, if there's one thing you're not going to do is beat him on the battlefield. You know, it's his job. This is all he does. It's his entire life. It's his passion. You know, Antigonus being like a young man, like, oh, maybe I won't do that. That's a very sensible move.
Yeah. Well, there's one quick little thing we need to mention just before that happens in and around this point, is that, Pyrrhus's eldest son, Ptolemy, is killed just in some sort of skirmish somewhere. Just so sort of gets surrounded.
When they're being harried by the Spartans. When they're leaving Sparta, the Spartans harry them,
Yeah.
And have you got a quote from Plutarch there? Because there's an amazing quote from Plutarch about this.
Well, I just it says, and with a blow on the side of laid him dead on the spot. A blow on the side of his head. What? When Pyrrhus goes mental afterwards?
Exactly. Yeah. So I found it. I think I found it. Right. So
he just has a bloodlust upon him when he realizes.
Yeah. I'll read it. I've got the quote. It's such a good quote. So basically, Ptolemy had gone to the rescue of some of the rear guard, been drawn into a narrow pass, and a fierce battle raged where Ptolemy was. And while a band of picked Spartans under the command of Evalcus, so I think the Cretan, the armies returned from Crete at this point, or something like that. The Spartan armies returned from Crete, but so a guy called Aptera in Crete. Sorry, no, a guy from Aptera, a place in Crete, ran up on one side of the prince who was fighting spiritedly, smote him and laid him low. Upon Ptolemy's fall and the rout of his company, the Spartans pursued, carrying all before them, and before they were aware of it, had dashed out into the plain and were cut off by the infantry of Pyrrhus. Against this band of Spartans, Pyrrhus, who had just heard of the death of his son and was in anguish, turned his Molossian horsemen. He himself charged at the head and sated himself with Spartan blood. He had always shown himself invincible and terrible in arms, but now his daring and might surpassed all previous displays. When he said, basically he goes mental and goes and kills a bunch of Spartans.
Yeah.
I mean, it says here, like, a Spartan hit his rein, the sword bridle. He was hit the rein and severed the rein. Pyrrhus transfixed the Spartan with a thrust of his spear, and at the same instant fell off his horse, and fighting on foot, at once proceeded to slay all of the picked band that were fighting over the body of Evalcus. Like Pyrrhus is a tank. He's a fucking juggernaut. that's basically the message of history about this guy. You just don't fight him. Do anything else, just don't fight him. You know.
Yeah, he basically heard of Ptolemy, his eldest boy's death, and just went full berserker mode. Just saw red and just needed blood for the blood god. Just skulls for the throne is all he wanted at that point. You know, nothing was going to stop him.
I see Pyrrhus as being like an entirely virtuous man, like as in what is like a man supposed to do? Well, a man's probably got to fight. He's probably got to do this, and he's very manly, and it's very like almost like a caricature. And it's the things in which he's deficient are such small things you would think, but they're so important to the outcome of his life that you just think, dude, if you'd just been a little more disciplined, then you would have done amazing. And that's the difference between him and Alexander, is the discipline. Like Alexander is anal about getting the job done, and Pyrrhus is dogged. Dogged. And Pyrrhus is just like, oh, I just wanted to come in and smash them. It's like, well, you almost did, but you just have to just cling to it, and he doesn't. But yeah, so they go on to Argos, and this is where the story begins to come to an end, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is Pyrrhus doesn't make it out of Argos in one piece, basically. No. So what happens is that night, Antigonus refuses battle, so Pyrrhus decides he's going to take Argos, going to occupy Argos in the middle of the night. And what he wants to do is actually get a big chunk of his army into the walled city of Argos. So a lot of his sort of skirt, he gets an inside man to open a gate, a relatively small gate, and lets a load of his men in the middle of the night, sort of skirmishers, foot soldiers. But what he also wants to do tries to do is get some more elephants in there. But this gate isn't really big enough for them. Certainly not with these towers on their back.
I can't believe the gate wasn't designed to allow elephants in. Fucking hell, Pyrrhus! This is such a dumb idea. Like, why do you need elephants in the town?
Again, it's one of those things when they say Pyrrhus is up there with the greatest generals of all time. You can't say that. Because of this sort of thing. This is stupid. This is crap. This is amateur hour. This is day one stuff. Alexander would not have made that mistake. That's kind of an obvious thing. Or like, why are you doing that? Are you out of your mind?
But again, you could put Pyrrhus opposing almost any general, in history, and Pyrrhus would make a very good show, right? He was an absolute first-rate general in all of history. Definitely one of the best. But there are just these key, like two, at least I would say just two, in fact, like key tactical decisions that he makes. They're just blunderingly stupid. And this is one of them. Like, what you don't need, it's the middle of the night. You don't need your war elephants in the city. Just get the soldiers in there and occupy it. Then it's fine. You've got it. You know? Like, fuck's sake.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah, God.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, just to say on that again about like the overall the overall reputation of Pyrrhus from earlier, Plutarch says this, and I'm talking about Antigonus, the original one-eyed Antigonus. Apparently, he said, "quote: It is also said that Antigonus, being asked who was the greatest general, answered, 'Pyrrhus would be if he lived to be old.' And Antigonus, indeed, spoke only of the generals of his time, but Hannibal, a few generations later, Hannibal said that of all the world had ever beheld, the first in genius and skill was Pyrrhus, Scipio second, and himself third."
Yeah.
End quote. So, but
isn't that interesting? Like, contemporaneously, he had an amazing reputation as a soldier.
Yeah, but this one is really a bit of a clanger, really, a bit of an error. Because what he has to do is the guys that control the elephants have to take these towers off, get the elephants inside, get the towers inside, put the towers back on, and that takes ages and is really loud. And any sense of
idiots.
Any sense of surprise or anything is gone. And why would you want war elephants in sort of tight city or town streets? An ancient town where there's probably really tight, narrow streets. It's
there's no
silly.
good reason. It's such a silly decision. But yeah. So basically, a clamor arises, if I recall correctly. People start running, and oh god, shit starts going down. Everyone starts panicking, and the his other son with the army. I think there's a mixed message or something like that, isn't there? Like there's a confused message, and his son brings up the rest of the army, effectively trapping everyone. And then one of the elephants like goes down and falls on its side, and it's bellowing, and like there's all this fucking chaos. And it's like, oh shit! And in the midst of all this chaos, a woman on top of a rooftop picks off one of the tiles and is throwing them down, and throws it down and manages to paralyze Pyrrhus by hitting the back of his neck, doesn't she?
Yeah. So I mean, in the night, Antigonus's army realised that Pyrrhus is sort of occupying the town, so they send in loads of their guys, and sort of in the middle of the night in the marketplace, it's sort of filled with a melee, and but it's at night and it's chaotic. And anyway, when the sun comes up, Pyrrhus realises, we're actually outnumbered here. Oh shit, we better retreat. So yeah, he sends word to his other son and the rest of his army sort of outside to try and make that gate opening bigger, because he needs to rush thousands of guys and his elephants back out of it post haste. He needs to, as quickly as he possibly can, make that gate bigger, smash it open. That's the message he sends. But somehow it gets garbled, or Chinese whispers. It gets wrong, and the message ggets to Pyrrhus' son to come and help, to come into the gate, which is the last thing he wanted. Of course, a complete loggerheads, complete blockage, which is the last thing he wanted.
Catastrophe.
And you say about that anecdote with the elephant. Everyone seems to love that one. I know I do. It says, and among the elephants already in the town, one named Nikon, striving to take up his master, who was fallen off wounded, rushed against the party that was re-entering, and overturned both friends and enemies promiscuously till he found the body. Then he took it up with his trunk, and carrying it on his two tusks, returned in great fury and trod all before him. It's funny, isn't it?
That's adorable.
Hard way. It's funny.
Yeah, but it's also adorable. The elephants, oh my master, like
it's sweet, isn't it? Yeah.
It's
And so like Pyrrhus is trying to get out of the town, and it's where he meets this sort of really ignominious end, doesn't he? He sort of comes out of the blue. This great figure in history, this great general, great man of his age, who's fought Romans and Sicilians and Carthaginians and Spartans and everyone.
Literally anyone who's in front of him.
And an old lady or someone's mum kills him, basically. He finds himself down some street or something, and fighting just this random guy, this random kid, teenager, whatever.
Oh, it's his mother. It's his mother in the story. It's his mother. Yeah, because she sees her son engaging with Pyrrhus, and she's like, "Oh fuck!" That's the last thing I want to happen. He's gonna fucking butcher him. Yeah, and then chucks the. And
so she chucks down a roof tile, because she sees her son basically, an unarmed man against this. She might not even have known. Who knows? It's not clear in Plutarch, but she sees this obviously well-experienced, grizzled cavalryman on horse about to kill her son. Obviously, so she throws down this roof tile, and roof tiles can be massive and heavy, can't they?
Oh, yeah.
Lots of accounts where all the inhabitants of a town or a city are throwing roof tiles, and it's really quite deadly. So anyway, she throws this roof tile, and it just smashes him in the head. And even though he's wearing a helmet, it seems it breaks his neck or breaks his back or something. It says that this woman, quote, seized with terror at the sight, she took up a large tile with both hands and threw it at Pyrrhus. The tile fell upon his head, and notwithstanding his helmet, crushed the lower vertebrae of his neck. End quote. And so, he was paralysed, laying on the floor, and an enemy soldier rushes up and lops his head off. And that's the end.
Well, there's an interesting quote from Plutarch here. I love, again, like, everything about Pyrrhus is just heroic, right?
Another nice last little bit.
Last little bit here, right? So he sank down from his horse and fell near the tomb of Lysimachus, unrecognized by who he was, by most who saw him, but a certain Pyrrhus, who was serving under Antigonus. So it was someone who recognized Pyrrhus. And 2 or 3 others ran up to him, saw who he was, dragged him into a doorway just as he was beginning to recover from the blow. And when Pyrrhus drew an Illyrian short sword with which to cut off his head, Pyrrhus gave him a terrible look, so that Pyrrhus was frightened. His hands trembled, yet he essayed the deed, but being full of alarm and confusion, his blow did not fall true along the mouth and chin, so it was slowly and with difficulty that he severed the head. But I think it's really interesting how, like, we say, it's ignominious, ignoble death to have died at the hands of a surprise hit from the rear by an old woman with a tile. But I mean, it does go to show that, I mean, literally no one else could kill him otherwise. Everyone he fought, he absolutely fucked up.
If it was 1-on-1, he couldn't be bested.
It doesn't seem to have just been 1-on-1 either. He seems to have just killed lots of people all the time. Like, it's all he did.
8-on-1 is unfair for them.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, you find yourself talking about some amusing caricature. Like, no one could surely have been this, like, amazing at war and fighting and actually, in combat. But then whenever I think that, I always try and remind myself of what's his fucking name? Athens.
Heracles.
That's it. Pericles. God damn it! I don't know why I couldn't get that out of my head. I was like, I knew exactly what I was talking about, right? But anyway, in Pericles' funeral oration, he says, "Look, we often, when we hear tales recounted that we don't believe that we could do ourselves, we are inclined to believe that they couldn't be done, and that's not true. I am a general. I've personally seen. He doesn't say exactly this, but like, I'm a general. I've seen people doing these feats, and so I think that we should, honor the feats of our own war dead and stuff like this." And I think that's a really interesting thing. It's a really interesting commentary on human nature. And I feel that I'm doing it now, because I don't know, I wasn't raised with the kind of life that Pyrrhus has. And I obviously he's, luckily to be endowed with whatever necessary characteristics he needs for that. So I'm sat there thinking, well, Christ, I'm pretty average sized. I don't think you could do that. But Pyrrhus probably wasn't. He was probably really well trained. He was probably quite a big guy. He's probably well fitted for this sort of stuff. And so I'm sat there going, no, that couldn't be possible. But maybe it could. Maybe it could. If your entire life is to train as a noble, so you've got access to all the resources you need, you're driven by a code of honor, like literally a religion in which the gods are involved in your personal, Greeks' war with Troy, and that's how we know about the gods. It's all valor and honor, and everyone around you shares that belief. Then maybe that does create these kind of manic heroes that end up being able to fight literally anyone and have to be killed by treachery and sneakery. Maybe it does.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what the laboratory of history suggests in Pyrrhus.
Yeah, it's a good way of putting it. I've never heard that.
That's just the way, because there's always this sort of like, oh, well, half the, most of this must be false. It's like, well, maybe, but maybe it wasn't. If ever there was going to be a time and a place that guys like this would exist, then ancient Greece after Alexander is exactly that time. Like,
but that's the great thing about ancient history, or like an account of Plutarch's, for example, that you've got what he says and nothing else, and so it may or may not be bullshit, but that's sort of the great thing about it. And what I was saying earlier on, or hinted at about different translations, like where you read out that bit, just as one example of this, what you're saying, where he was recovering from the blow, sort of a thing.
Yeah.
The wording you used was a bit different. My one says, just one line says, so Pyrrhus had drawn his Illyrian blade to cut off his head when Pyrrhus opened his eyes and gave him so fierce a look that he was struck with terror. Like
that's a great translation.
It's crazy, isn't it? It paints a picture of just quite a specific picture, doesn't it? And
you'll notice that what we get from the ancient Greeks is narrative. You'll notice they're constantly ascribing motive to the actors involved, and unless you actually have like good evidence, you don't know why half of them did what they did, but it fits the narrative, so you just go along with it. But we don't know that this is the case, but this is what the stories of the people who pass down this information have said, so that, the people who were directly involved, from whom the information was first derived, to the next telling and the next telling, this is how they told it. So whether or not like the details are exactly accurate, I think that what's probable is the emotions that are driving it are probably more accurate than the details, like how people felt about the events, so when they say, Sicily was an uproar against Pyrrhus, yeah, there probably was, probably in all the drinking houses of Sicily, in various towns. Oh, I can't believe that Pyrrhus is taxing us high. Oh, I can't believe he's conscripted, blah, blah, blah. There's like, there probably was this feeling, but you can't historically prove it, by any means. So we just have to take their word for it that they weren't trying to lie to future generations.
Yeah, that's sort of the job of the modern historian, is it, to sort of try and unpick how reliable or truthful the ancient accounts are.
But again, like with all things, I imagine that the spirit of it is probably more accurate than the facts.
Well, that's a nice little way to tie it off, because like the last paragraph or two of Plutarch is sort of how when Antigonus, Antigonus II, the grandson of the one-eyed Antigonus, gets Pyrrhus's head, his son brings it to him. So the great grandson of the original Antigonus brings the grandson the head of Pyrrhus. Yeah. And Antigonus is outraged. He's not happy. He's really pissed off. Again, it reminds me of when Caesar gets Pompey's head. He's revolted, disgusted by it, outraged by it. And he cries at how many members of his family have been killed in these sets of civil wars. He's not happy to see a man who one of his equals in a way, or one of his contemporaries, one of his peers even, to be presented with his head. It's not a great victory. He's not happy about it. I think he says he cries or he's in tears or something, and that's sort of the end of Pyrrhus.
But this is I like the last paragraph as well. You can tell that there's a genuine emotional weight here, because Antigonus buries the head and body of Pyrrhus with honor. The army the army just go over to him because they're not following anyone now that Pyrrhus is dead. But I like the last line. He dealt mildly with the friends of Pyrrhus when he became master of their camp and their whole force. That's it. And the thing is, like the spirit of the thing, he wasn't, because he wasn't trying to actually kill Pyrrhus. That wasn't the aim, and it wasn't the aim to wipe them out. It was like feuding families. Not necessarily like mortal enemies. And it's interesting how this seems to have bookended like a kind of attitude in the way that he's written it.
Yeah, because a lot of people, that Antigonus II goes on to be sort of the master of Greece for quite a long time, and like the biggest player really of that whole generation. And a lot of historians have said, and it's hard to disagree really, that Pyrrhus's life, with the end of his life, it ends a period, a whole era of sort of, that he was the last of those, as we said at the beginning, didn't we, that his life is still firmly in that sort of Alexandrian stroke Homeric mold.
Yes.
And that after him, he's really the last of those. Or it's nice and neat for historians to say he was the last of those. So it's sort of the end of an era when he dies.
Yeah, but the and it really is like for like I don't know, about probably almost 100 years, you've got this real like Homeric sort of the Homeric ideals are really held. You know, they seem to really be like something that drive the Macedonian court. You know, they seem to view themselves in the same mold, in the same way, and the success must have only reinforced those beliefs. You know, like Alexander, like I mean, Philip's success conquering Greece was enough, but then Alexander's success conquering the rest of the world to the far off regions of India, you know, that must have really given them the impression that, holy shit, we're the masters of the fucking world. We are like the gods. You know, look at how many men we can move. Look at what we can make happen. Oh god, now we're fighting each other. Oh shit, you know. So you know, they obviously thought of themselves as a different class of person. You know, and if you're in these families, then there's something special about you.
Yeah, and it sort of played out that was true, because you get the impression all through the decades of the wars of the successors, they're all fighting each other and changing factions and doing all these sorts of things. And it's like, so nobody else in the whole world can raise an army, it seems. I mean, that's obviously not the case. The reality couldn't have been like that. But that's sort of the impression you get, that no one else, there's no question for like 20 or 30 years whether, you know, like the Parthians or the Elamites might raise an army of their own. No, it's just handed from Seleucid to Antigonus to Ptolemy, the same bit of land, and do you know what I mean?
To raise an army,
there seems to be a lot that must be omitted. Is what I mean. So.
Yeah, but I don't think that's the case, because what you've got is people who claim to be kings, right? So the title of king has power, right? It's got influence over the minds of men, and in each ethnic group, in each tribe, you would have needed some kind of legitimacy, right? You can't just choose anyone and make them the king. There has to be a method of legitimacy, which is normally a connection to a bloodline. But the thing is, if you've got a king already, and you know the messengers come out and say, right, the king is looking for, you know, to hire men, he'll play like 3 obols a day or whatever it is, the pay gods, you know, and so you can come and fight for him, and he's going to glorious campaign against the vile Antigonus in Macedonia, much plunder, loads of women, you know, everyone's going to come back rich. Come on. Like, that's where that's where the energy goes, you know. So the young men are like, oh, great adventure, you know, we're going to make some money out of this and kill some bad guys. We're going to come back men and heroes and blah, 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 blah. You know, you can see how the energy gets sucked away. The people you would normally, you know, who would otherwise be revolting are actually off kicking some ass and doing stuff. So I'm actually not so surprised, because like the revolts and stuff happen when things are bad and not getting any better. You know, when there's lots of stuff going on. Oh God, who knows what's going to come around the corner tomorrow? You know, who knows who the next king will be? You know, there's a lot of stuff going on, and I think that is something that is genuine. I mean, there would have undoubtedly been uprisings and stuff like this, and they'd have been put down by the Diadochi themselves. But I can see why the power politics of the region gripped everything, because it was totalizing. You know, everyone was under their command. Like, there seems to have been no constitutional limits to the powers of these kings.
Yeah, and to be fair, there are some examples or anecdotes of when, like, someone, like, for example, when Seleucus or Perdiccas put down loads of people or reconquered bits of the Alexandrian Empire. Or, like, I just think, for example, like the people of Babylon are like literally passed around between about 5 different generals, like the same one many times and things. Even the next generations coming up, you know, Rome is what happens with Rome, really, because they end up not too long conquering that whole part of, you know, Greece. Rome end up, you know, expanding out into Greece.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like, well, it's within about 50 years, isn't it?
Yeah, not too long at all. They're on the way. As you said, I think Pyrrhus may have been among the last opportunities, really, one of the last windows to sort of wipe Rome out. But after that, it wasn't likely to happen anytime soon.
Or at least contain them, you know. But no, I do think that Pyrrhus, I mean, he like I say, he might have been able to do it if he'd committed. Who knows? But he didn't. Like with all things, he just didn't fucking finish it. Like if he'd committed just conquering Sparta, he probably wouldn't have been killed by some old woman in the streets. So you know.
Yeah.
Like, fucking hell, Pyrrhus, just do the job. But he's still one of my favorite characters, just because of the kind of guy he seems to have been. He's doesn't seem to have been very objectionable, to be honest.
Yeah, no, me too. He's one among my favourite characters from ancient history, certainly. I mean, he sort of shines out, doesn't he? As everyone likes. He's sort of a winner and a loser, isn't he?
And a tragic figure in ways.
Yeah, and you get a little bit. He wasn't that young by the time he dies, but you do also get a bit of a feeling of, he could have had another 10, 20 years of doing stuff, of more adventures, and it's sort of cut short a bit. It needn't have been, really. You get that with a fair few, like Alexander himself or Henry V or somebody. If only they'd lived longer, what other things they might have achieved. But
who knows what else they would have done. But I love this. I thought this was great. Looking forward to seeing what people think.
Oh, cool. Well, thanks. We'll put it out if you want to do another. I think you mentioned Livy. Actually, do Livy.
What part of Livy?
Well, the war with Hannibal.
Oh, Hannibal, right? Oh, yeah. No, there are multiple sources for Hannibal.
Well, we could.
Polybius.
Or I mentioned to you, I'd love to do a talk about the Germania, Tacitus's Germania, and we can also just talk about the nature of what it is to be German and Germany in general. Well, with reference heavily to the Germania. I thought that might be good.
That does sound good. But let's do Hannibal then. Let's do Hannibal.
Oh, okay, cool.
I've like everyone else, I've read so many different books about him. I've got loads of little facts and little bits of things. Oh, by the way, when he was crossing the Alps, he used wine, heated up rocks and then poured wine over them to make the rocks split so the army could carry on. Silly facts like this. So let's do Hannibal next, because Hannibal's a great story too. These are all great stories.
Yeah, I mean, Livy would be I would sort of be the backbone of my sort of narrative and of it. Yeah, and that'd be great. I saw one time you did a video with Lindy Page, because he's like a massive Hannibal fan, isn't he?
Yeah. I don't know whether he actually ended up producing that Hannibal thing that he did. Even I forgot to check, keep track of what happened to it. Okay, no, that's cool, man. We'll do Hannibal next. And man, Hannibal's great, isn't he? He's fucking stoic.
Well, if we did 5 hours on Alexander, I would have to be careful not to.
Yeah, no.
As long as that again, couldn't it?
Yeah, but we'll have a whole evening for Hannibal. Yeah, we'll say. Oh man, it's okay. So say in a month's time or something like that, we'll do Hannibal.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, Ian. I'll let you go.
All right. See you later, man. Bye.
Cheers.